Everybody welcome. So you've probably heard of client diversity. It was a big thing in 2021, and the reason you heard about it in 2021 and now you're hearing about it again is because we did a large push for consensus layer. There are two different clients when you run a validator, consensus layer clients and execution layer clients. And there was a push for consensus layer clients in 2021, and now we're doing a push for execution layer client diversity. And a quick note on that verbiage, we want to start using supermajority risk instead of client diversity, because for some reason diversity conjures all sorts of socio-political thoughts in people's head, and as Jasper will mention, it's not an altruistic endeavor. This isn't just for to make Ethereum look good. It's entirely a selfish choice. So we recently had some Base with Nethermind bugs, which brought the conversation to the forefront again. And I was hoping, Jasper, you could give us a quick intro on what the supermajority risk is.
Yeah, I'd love to. So, first off, I want to say thank you to Peter.
Wait, sorry. We should probably introduce ourselves. I'm Nixo. I'm the executive director of ETH. We advocate for solo stakers. Let's go down.
Hi, I'm Colton. I'm representing Figment. We are an institutional staking node operator supporting over 250 clients on 40 of the top 100 staking networks. Custodians, exchanges, asset managers, foundations.
Hi, I am Jasper, the friendly ghost. My role is sort of biz dev and community management and being a decentralization maxi. Rocket Pool is the second largest liquid staking protocol and has over 3,000 node operators, which is like 100x times larger than the next one. Yeah.
Hey everyone, I'm Josh from Nethermind. We're a research and development company in the blockchain space. One of the services that we offer are we develop an execution layer client, and we also run over 10,000 validators.
Hey everyone, my name is Alessandro. I'm from P2P.org. P2P.org is a leading staking provider. We operate in more than 40 networks, and our service is mostly catered for institutions. And yeah,
I think you guys are going to have to hold that mic a little closer.
Name's Ben Rodriguez, Senior Protocol Specialist at Coinbase Cloud. We are also a top node operator provider, operating on multiple different networks, and working with many different clients, mostly institutional. But yeah, happy to be here, happy to talk about this.
Okay, back to Jasper for the intro.
Thank you. And great to be on the panel with so many incredible people. So I want to start by saying thank you to Peter and the rest of the Get team. So we're going to be talking a lot about switching off Get, but that does not take away from how amazing Get is. We owe a huge debt of service to the Get team for essentially carrying Ethereum on their back for like a decade. Second point, there is currently $100 billion worth of ETH staked. That is an astronomical amount of money, and it would really, really suck to see that all go away because of the bug. So that's what we're here to talk about, supermajority client risk. If you have a large sum, over 66% of validators, that run into a bug, originally we were talking about the consensus layer, but it can also happen on the execution layer. That bug finalizes. Once finalized, you can cause a whole series of bad events happening to minority stakers and as a majority client because the chain splits. Now, what's important to understand about this is that once you're running the majority client and this event happens, you're pretty much screwed immediately. You cannot switch to a backup client. The time of finalization is about 1 block. Once finalized, it's over. Things will start bleeding, the chain will go to a mess, and it will require if the DAO is bad, this will make the DAO look like a joke. It's going to be social coordination across dApps, DeFi, real-world assets to stakers, every participant in the Ethereum ecosystem. It would be doomsday. That said, we can avoid this. We can make this never happen again. If you are a staker, as Nixo mentioned, the selfish, the not altruistic, the purely utilitarian thing to do is to run a minority client and avoid this risk. Because of that, we have been pushing people to get off of Get, run minority clients. Because once we get under that 66% threshold, that risk drops dramatically. For the Get team, in my opinion, this is something that they should be welcoming with open arms, because once that threshold is reached, once we're under that amount, all teams have a tremendous weight lifted off their shoulders and can now experiment and act with more confidence. We have the Dencun upgrade coming soon. I think March 13th or something. And it would be amazing if we approach that hard fork without the risk of losing and burning almost $100 billion of value. Yes, some might say social intervention will mitigate some of the loss. You're not mitigating 100%. Maybe you're not even mitigating 50% of the loss in USD terms. The only way we can properly deal with this threat is by going under 66% on CAD.
Thank you so much for that, Jasper. So to sort of set the stage on the conversation, no shame, I want us to go through and everybody tell us what your organization is currently at in terms of how many get validators you guys run, and if there are any plans in the works to change that and what those plans are.
Yeah, so I'll go first. So Figment announced about a month ago that we're going to completely be moving off Get. We are in the process of doing so. So we have about 25% of our validators currently off Get today, and doing more of a gradual rollout. So doing testing, looking at the data to make sure that whatever our secondary execution layer client is, it's behaving properly as expected with our
So for Rocket Pool, tracking this data is not so simple. Rocket Pool is fully permissionless, and there are graffiti tags that help us, analyze what clients people are using, but we'll never know for sure. With that said, historically, Rocket Pool has always been very diverse in both consensus and execution layers. I believe currently Get is just under 33% of the clients, around that mark. And on the consensus layer, it's just as equal. And Rocket Pool has done amazing on this since inception.
Yeah, for Nethermind, it's very simple. You run 100% Nethermind execution.
Yeah, from our side, following the Nethermind incident, we decided to switch all our validators on web. So now we are running our validators on Basin. To be fair, we also have a backup setup that's still okay. Yeah, we are 100% Basin.
Yeah, so we actually just announced 2 days ago our plans on cloud in terms of like diversifying our execution cloud. Thank you, appreciate that. So actually our first Nethermind clients are actually going out this week. And then over the next several weeks, we're going to be split 50% Get, 50% Nethermind. And over the next couple of months, we're going to actually put in Aragon as well into our fleet to make it like a three-way split. So that's what we're doing right now. And just to preempt this question away, what do you call that? On the consensus layer, we are operating around the same between Prism and Lighthouse.
Awesome. And just a follow-up question to that announcement, I want to ask, what goes into deciding when Coinbase decides to switch? Why did it take so long? Like what sort of engineering resources are needed for that?
Absolutely. So above all else, we care about the customer funds, right? I'm not trying to say anything else about anybody else. It's about how we do anything here at Coinbase. The thing is, right, we have a way that we set up our infrastructure, right? So we have to go through a strict technical assessment to be able to see if these clients are, for example, compatible with our architecture, right? We love what, for example, like I said, Nethermind and Aragon. I didn't mention Besu, right? Besu, we love Besu, but it just seemed like when we were trying to do this and trying to do it a little bit on a time frame, like a quicker time frame, it was just a little bit more compatible with our architecture having Nethermind and Aragon, right? Other things that we look at, right, from a technical perspective, is history of incidents, right? The response time to those incidents, right? The mean time to resolution of those incidents. There's also other things that we think about in terms of how well it works for our architecture, right? I told you compatibility, right? Compatibility with the consensus funds, compatibility with how it runs within our architecture, because we do certain things that may not be maybe not traditional or anything like that, right? But so we take these all into account. So we want to move in a meticulous manner, right? So that's why it took a little bit of time, but we heard from the community, absolutely, we care about the long-term health of the ecosystem of Ethereum. So we move as quickly as possible, but meticulously as possible, based on the constraints that we have.
Cool, thank you so much for that. Following on that, I want to ask a question for everybody here. Are execution layer clients, are minority execution layer clients ready for adoption? Do they meet GES standards?
Go ahead. I mean, I think this is just an example, and I apologize, by the way, I just figured might as well continue. I think this just goes to show, what everyone here on the panel is doing, right? The other operators and us at Coinbase. It just shows that it is ready for prime time. These requirements, they've had all this time to become more mature and all that stuff, right? And again, not taking anything away from Geth. As what was mentioned, Geth, with Ethereum on its back for almost the latter part of the decade. So I think it is these minority clients are absolutely ready for prime time. And this this all of what we've been doing up until this point shows that.
Yeah, from my side, I think we in general we had a very positive experience. I mean, there is a reason why Geth is general the experience has been very positive. Same also with Basin. I did not mention that we actually also have plans to Nethermind in our setup. I'll say overall, from a performance wise, yes, it's ready for for institutions. Just to make clear, sometimes the challenge could be because each client has kind of its own specification, its own parameters, its own language. So very often it can be a bit more challenging for teams that maybe are not so experienced with a specific language to, for example, do some debug, some stuff. So that just makes the team less comfortable to run that specific line. Overall, I would say our experience is quite positive with the previous mentioned.
Yeah, obviously at Nethermind we're very bullish on our own products. I think the Nethermind plan is pretty great. But just to put it more objectively, I guess, I looked this morning on Rated Network, we have a 98.53% effectiveness rating, running 100% Nethermind nodes, and 100% proposer rating. And just recently we announced that we have, I believe, experimental support for SnapSync serving with Nethermind, so hopefully that takes some pressure off of Geth in terms of network responsibilities. So, we have a very large and absolutely incredible team of .NET masters, and so we think that the Nethermind client has been and will continue to be ready for prime times.
So I like to think of Rocket Pool as the training grounds for the different execution and consensus layer clients. With 3,000 node operators, we're sort of like the QA, the real QA for these clients. And you can go into the Discord and talk to the hundreds of people running minority clients for, at this point, many months. And they reported bugs, and they've helped make these clients ready for prime time. And now, I believe soon we will be adding rec from Paradigm to the smart node stack on testnet. So Paradigm and rec, they will be going through the same gamut of having hundreds, if not thousands, of Rocket Pool node operators make sure that these clients are ready, so that when the big boys of Coinbase can step in, they're not going to be losing customer funds.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to reiterate, if they weren't ready, then we wouldn't have announced any news to migrate over. But it is also, it's a two-way street, right? It's not just on execution layer clients to be performing, it's also for all of us to build our own infrastructure in a way that is compatible with these execution layer clients. And you're talking about large-scale infrastructure like, the largest state providers in the world, and even people that are a little bit state less than that. There are several, probably millions of different permutations in the way that you can build your infrastructure, and different ways of doing that means that we're going to interact with these clients differently. So with time and testing, we'll figure out how to operate better with them, we'll figure out how to operate better with us. But yeah, as I said, two-way street, it's not just on the clients, it's also on us.
Cool. I wanted to ask you something specific. You guys put out a press release, and it said, our design philosophy has been that software client concentration is the biggest risk of correlated slashing. So we designed our system to promptly be able to swap clients. Do you stand by that? And because one of the concerns is that if a supermajority client bug happened, and the Nethermind bug that happened earlier this year, it actually built a new chain. So if the same bug happened on Get, people running Get validators wouldn't actually notice. So the minority clients would notice, and by the time that my super majority clients noticed, they would already have forked the chain. And so swapping those clients would actually be the worst case scenario.
Forked and finalized on the new chain.
I think either way, if you get to a supermajority bug in a finalized fork that way, I think those are kind of screwed. But yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up first of all. So I guess the point of that article was not necessarily to say like if that same bug were to happen on Geth, then we wouldn't necessarily switch. It's more in the sense that like we have the capability to do that. I guess to like walk them through the process of what would actually happen. Say we saw a bug and like our values were testing blocks or something were down. First of all, it's all hands on deck at Figment. Everybody's trying to figure out what's going on, and if we need to, it's pull the plug and stop signing things. And we're willing to risk that kind of downtime to make sure that.
But you wouldn't notice it in time. Because your validators would look like if they were testing just fine.
If you're running Geth.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, well, I think the main point is there that we're not going to be running Geth anymore.
Do you have a timeline for that?
I can't give a timeline because I said as we are testing things like like I said, as we build our infrastructure around these things, we new things pop up, and I don't want to give any false hope, but 25% of the way there, hopefully that's it. We're not going to pull out halfway.
Could I add a follow-up there? One thing you mentioned I think is important is that minority stakers in a supermajority client issue would actually be negatively impacted as well. And this is something that the core devs are working on changing. So the core devs want the supermajority clients to have severe punishment if a bug happens. But they don't want that to happen to minority stakers, and they're working on that. On the Holeshki testnet, when it was first originally launched, it actually had a failure. It had a bad launch. And we saw this play out. Minority stakers were bleeding out at almost the same rate as majority stakers. But that actually prompted the Ethereum core devs to take a closer look and devise systems to stop that. So now, in the future, not currently, but in the near future, if we are ever in that position where there is a supermajority bug, minority stakers will not be equally affected.
Cool. Alessandro, I wanted to point something to you. P2P and Allnodes did an amazing job. So after the Netherbyte bug, there was a huge push on Twitter of like, wait, a lot of people didn't know about this risk, and they were staking with some provider, and they were like, what is my provider running? And P2P and Allnodes, I think within 48 hours, switched completely to Nethermind or to basic. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, how are you able to switch so quickly? What was the infrastructure? Were you already set up for that? And are there technical barriers that professional node operators might be running into that you might have some advice for other teams who might be considering but might not be so open to be on a client diversity panel?
So yeah, thanks a lot for mentioning that. Yeah, indeed. So I think there are like two sides for this change. One is more like from infrastructure, the infrastructure side. From the beginning, like the vision was to have like infrastructure as flexible as possible. We are using like a specific validator client called Vouch. For all people that don't know, Vouch is a dedicated validator client, works very well with multiple Beacon nodes. And what basically allows us is to have something called like multi-node validator client. We have basically in our infrastructure like an active setup, which before this change was running on Get. And we also had a backup, which you said was running on this. So obviously, being a backup, it's important that if things go wrong with the active one, we are immediately ready to switch it, to replace it, and all setup should be up and running immediately. So that also means our backup is, say, from the moment we basically set it up, is heavily tested. So when the Nethermind bug unfortunately happened, there was a big push internally to obviously to change. So that's also the other side of the coin. Like inside our organization, we really want to kind of protect our clients switching to a minority client. But this was also made possible because for us it was as simple as switching the backup with the active one. So that also explains why it was so fast, and why I think in general like multi-node validator client is is really important for all the major providers out there. And yeah, it just makes the whole architecture more robust.
Cool, thank you so much. So just to review some thresholds, we have 3 key thresholds here: 33%, 50%, 66%. At 33%, the chain is no longer finalizing. It's not really that big of a deal because the attestations or transactions are still being processed. Things just have a higher probability or higher possibility of being reordered. A bug can happen, the client team comes in, they fix it, the validators come back online. 50%, there's a bug, it starts building a new chain, but it still doesn't finalize, so it's still not as big of a deal as 66%, where a bug happens, the wrong chain, the non-canonical chain finalizes, and then they cannot come back to the original chain. And that is the risk that we're dealing with here. So there is a lot of thinking happening in both directions. Most of the thinking up till now has been that it's better for both the network and the operator to be on a minority client, but there was a small subset of people during this last push who started a conversation about, well, if the moneyed organizations, if the biggest validator runners are on the supermajority chain and they fork, and they start a new chain, well, they're going to be advocating for them to be bailed out somehow or for that to become the canonical chain. So I, as a solo node operator without very much money in the ring, without being able to be on the all core devs calls, I want to be on the same chain as those operators. So what would you guys say to those people, and how much merit does that have? Anybody can take this.
I can start, but as far as I'm aware, this industry started because we didn't want bailouts to keep happening. So I would hope that kind of a situation doesn't really happen. But I do think, like, regardless of what I say here, what the scenario ends up being, we're in a very tricky situation when that happens. Whether it's a chain split, or we have another Ethereum classic, or a hard fork, or they roll back the chain. It's kind of going to have, like you mentioned, panel is it's going to be all of us in the room, it's going to be Lido in the room, it's going to be Circle, Tether, Eigenlayer. All the APIs is built on top of Eigenlayer, DeFi protocols, etc. So it's going to be a huge social coordination to make sure that we make the right decision, but we prefer not to get there, which is why we're up here today making those decisions.
And the ETH price would probably still crash like 90%.
Regardless of which way.
Yeah.
I just want to ask like a follow-up. Let's imagine that this does unfortunately happen. How would you actually approach your customer? Do you have a fiduciary duty to advocate for the non-canonical chain? And further, is it like a legal obligation to make stakers whole?
Let's point that question at everybody.
As far as the legal ramifications go, I'm not sure. I think that the complexity with which transactions were processed, after the issue arose, like we're dealing with real world assets potentially. I think these are the things that can only be decided in real time when this catastrophe is taking place. And so, yeah, I think that the only answer to that is just to not get there in the first place.
And that leads into, is there anything that can be done to, in your opinion, to better mitigate a supermajority risk that we're not doing right now? What do we need to do more of? What do we need to do less of? What kind of education needs to happen? And do we continue relying on the social layer to do the majority of this legwork?
I could start. I think you bringing up the social layer, I think it's doing its job. That's really what it is, right? Like, we're here and it's doing its job. Like, people are there are folks out there that know a lot more than like a lot of other folks, and they bring up like these potential scenarios, these situations, right? And then they socialize it through many different channels. And Ethereum has the strongest social layer out there. It's very, very important. And what we're here right now because of that social layer. So I think we continue to actually depend on the social layer because that is actually one of the biggest strengths of being in this community, right? So yeah, there could potentially be other things like education and whatnot, but then again, that education also goes through the social layer. the folks that know a lot, the core devs, people like, at Rocket Pool, Nethermind, everybody, they have this knowledge, right? And they will be able to continue to socialize that. And we need to continue to actually strengthen.
I agree with you. I agree. Like the social layer, I think it proved to be effective. But I will also say that the social layer, or at least like the social push right now, is kind of fading away. I mean, how many panels did we have in this conference about supermajority risk? How many did we have about scalability?
It's not popular on Twitter.
It's not sexy. It's not a sexy topic. I totally understand, but let's realize that the whole conversation about scalability, about making layer, they make no sense if like a catastrophic event like this happens. So this should be I think like the priority number one for the whole community. The whole Ethereum community should keep pushing, demanding the organization for change. Change is possible, and we have evidence that even large organizations like Coinbase can go to Killing, something like this. So we can do it obviously P2P as well. I also like maybe to see some experimentation in terms of economic incentives. In the sense that we recently have seen with like the Starknet airdrop that stakers can be rewarded for that. What if it's possible to find ways to reward stakers that run like minority lines? What about ABS? I mean, it's also possible for ABS to kind of decide, okay, what kind of node operators they can participate. What if it's possible for them to only choose the one that run minority lines? I know there are some technical challenges. Unfortunately, understanding which client run validator is not that easy. But maybe this is a research area. Maybe we need to have more economic incentives.
Yeah, so actually on that topic, Nethermind has received a grant from the Ethereum Foundation to study exactly this, identifying the client distribution of validators autonomously in the network. This is ongoing research, so we have a set of research articles that you can read about the kind of ongoing progress. One of the ideas is, as far as economic incentives go, and I have to give a shout out to one of my colleagues, Swapno, for this idea, is if we do have an observability platform where we can identify validators and what software they're running, then potentially Eigenlayer ABS who are interested in having a distributed validator set operating their ABS, they could give greater rewards to operators running minority clients. So I think there's an interesting interplay here between observability, incentives, and Eigenlayer ABSs that's kind of underexplored, and I think that offers some exciting potential economic incentives for running minority clients.
On that topic, if you are an ABS, Rocket Pool is working on, there is a potential vote for Rocket Pool Eigenlayer integration. And Rocket Pool has the most robust, decentralized, and diverse set of node operators, so good thoughts. Additionally, when you have this kind of risk, I just want to mention that this is not a theoretical risk. On Binance Smart Chain, they had a supermajority bug, and it finalized, and it essentially kicked the minority stakers off the chain for weeks. And to my understanding, those other clients have not fully recovered.
In the context of economic incentives, I also want to say that I don't think that is, I personally don't think that is a good role, only because the data, the most accurate data that we have right now is survey data. And I know, like client mentioned to me yesterday, that there was something that was accepted that will pass data from the execution layer client to the consensus layer client, and that is entirely spoofable data. So that's going to be something that you can manually change. And so that is voluntary data, and if we economically incentivize, we could create the wrong incentives there.
I completely agree. Yeah. So just to clarify, that idea is predicated on having some sort of generally reliable observability or metrics. And that's why we're working with the Ethereum Foundation on the observability side of things.
Just that, like practical terms, I once made a tweet. I was like, should Rocket Pool do an airdrop to Nethermind stakers? This is just after the bug. And like within 20 minutes, this one MEV over posted a screenshot of them spoofing their Nethermind, or so their Get client into REP. So like real difficult problem to work on.
Yeah, and having verifiable data that's definitely a prerequisite for having sort of on-chain incentives. There is a question about how that gets implemented. Today, the client that you're using is entirely an off-chain thing. Now you can still do on-chain, but I still consider it off-chain. But I do think, if we have, if we know what every single validator is running in terms of the client that they're on, client variable that they're on, we could have opened up another attack vector, and that's a deep rabbit hole that I won't go into, but I think what all that we really need is really like an aggregate view of the network. And we say, okay, this percent of the network is running, yeah, this percent of the network is running, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know what that looks like, but I don't know if it's necessarily on a per validator basis, but the important thing is it could be very simple in terms of what the
Do the rest of you guys think that this is an eventuality that we will have unspoofable observability into the execution layer?
I might have a bit of an unpopular opinion here. I think in general, unreliable data is actually a healthy sign for the network. It actually means that the network enables privacy, so nodes are able to indeed have privacy. Somehow I don't like the idea of having somewhere like a public registry where you can see, okay, for each node data, which client they're running, what's next step, like the node URL, node ID. I don't think that's necessarily like a good thing. So in my opinion, I see indeed us leading with what's called unreliable data, and maybe some of the existing tools get better and better. But I don't know. I don't think we'll ever have 100% reliability, and I think it's a good thing.
I think never mind. You have research on like how to make that observability data a little bit better. I think there's going to be strides in getting data more accurate, right? That's definitely going to happen. But as was mentioned here, I think it's just it's never going to be perfect. I think, right? And I think that's also a good thing. Alluding to privacy and all that fun stuff, right? So I think we'll get better and better data. It's going to get more and more accurate, but it's not going to be perfect. And I think we should be okay with that as well.
I have one more question I want to ask Alessandro. One of the problems that we have is that a lot of the node operators behind providers are a little bit invisible. You don't necessarily know who the node operator is, and so you can't really hold them accountable. And a lot of them aren't answering survey data on what they're running. I know Lido does a really good job of making sure that they know what their operators are running. But a lot, if you go to supermajority.info, a lot of those providers are unknown because they didn't respond to questions. So how do we engage these more invisible operators? And I say that as P2P is a little bit more of an under the table, it's not as well known as Nethermind and Rapital, who are front facing, user facing things where they can users know who to bother.
So to make sure, the question is, how do we make sure you are the node operators are more transparent in terms of clients that we are using?
Yeah, how do users identify sort of who their node operators are and then hold them accountable when they're behind providers?
Yeah, as I say, unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for that one. There is probably a trust layer here, trusting the providers to do the right thing. Let's not forget, the space where we are, as node operators, is quite competitive. For us, branding and reputation is extremely important. Nobody wants to upset the community by saying stuff that it's not true. And again, at some point, those things can be verified. So for us, the incentive is again what we communicate when it comes to very basic. Is also to make sure that our reputation is always high. So we have that incentive to be transparent. So maybe there's this hidden incentive.
Just to push back a little, not to be too directed, but peer-to-peer actually engages now in timing games, which in the Ethereum community, very controversial, right? I personally am very against it, and that to me is of the class of things like secretly running against supermajority. So how do we square that there are some topics that different people disagree on the level of taboo-ness? So the social layer is not one homogenous thing. So some people might think what they're doing is completely okay.
So to be fair, like P2P did not invent timing games. A lot of node operators were already running timing games before P2P. I think what we actually did was probably being too transparent in what we were doing. And I think actually a good thing, a good side is that following that, we started like some research also from the Ethereum Foundation, analyzing this, how can we prevent this from happening. Obviously, this is enabled from a protocol level. So again, it opens the question of how can we make sure that providers kind of stick to sort of the rules by the protocols, even though they are not entirely enforced.
It's interesting though that once P2P, again, this is not to blame P2P, but once you guys made your announcement that it appears that other providers have surreptitiously or quietly started to engage in timing games. So even though it's good that you guys are very transparent about it, it is still of the class of things that once people start talking about it, people will secretly start doing it not transparent.
Again, just for this P2P did not invent time games.
Right.
This was already happening, and I think we actually brought the topic at the entire community, and we started discussing, okay, how can we avoid this now?
So in the Supreme Majority thing, this would be like someone very publicly saying, we're going to run full again. Maybe this is getting too far off topic, but
That's not a one-to-one match at all. Like the incentive, whatever P2P did with timing games, whatever. Supermajority, like risk, that is an existential problem for the entire community, right? I would imagine there is no incentive for P2P to be like, yeah, we're gonna just, all the way, right? So I think that this is not a one-to-one match here, and I think like this is, it goes outside the bounds of this conversation, but it's also not a one-to-one match.
I want to thank you guys all so much for being on the panel. I know that it's actually a really brave and transparent thing for you guys to be up here because there are different ratios of guests up here. And so I honestly think being transparent is the best thing that we can do, and having users be able to know who to contact to be like, I want my provider running more of this minority client. So thank you guys, and thank you for your commitments to move off of Geth and for your engagement on social media and things like that. Any last comments from anybody? Great, thank you guys so much.